There is a commercial on TV that should worry everyone, but it's about a generative AI where the father or somebody is asking the AI chatbot to help his daughter write a letter of support, and how this one Olympian inspired them to do that. So they write the letter for the girl, and she just kind of finesses it and then sends it off. No, not even close. First draft should be done by the kid.
Aspire Leaders, that is the wonderful and amazing Rick Wormeli, as he is here not only to provide wisdom today on a variety of topics, including what he was talking about, AI, but to celebrate the 300th episode of Aspire to Lead. You're going to learn why I specifically invited this wonderful educator on for this special episode, and Rick provides valuable guidance on navigating tough discussions and fostering civil discourse within educational settings as a leader, integrating AI in schools, and how he has been helping on a whole host of common struggles all around this country. I'm so excited to get started, so let's jump into the conversation. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, Aspire Leaders and Teach Better family. For those who are watching on YouTube, you will know and see on my face that I am downright giddy for this episode for two reasons. Because we're celebrating that this is the 300th episode. Yes, I said 300th episode. And the man that is spinning in his chair celebrating is also one of my favorite guests on Aspire to Lead. And if you have ever heard me on someone else's podcast, they ask me which episode or guest I was most excited about or who had the most impact, I would say that Rick Wormeli is number one on that list. And I just thank you, sir, so much for joining me once again on Aspire to Lead.
We have to get you out more, Josh.
No, it's true. I always tell a story that very young in my educational career as a teacher, your book was a book study that we did as campus. And it was too after, your book came out, Fair Isn't Always Equal. And I was like, okay, who's this guy? So I went on YouTube and I looked up Rick Wormeli. And of course, there's these really, it's just evergreen content still. I watched it not too long ago. And it's just you on camera. Someone has already posted a question or asked a question, which is in the title. And it's just you answering these questions. And it's just so thought out. And it makes so much sense. And I was hooked right away, Rick, that after those YouTube videos, like, okay, so I dove into the book. Resource was phenomenal. But I always remember the conversations that came from that and how volatile, unfortunately, for some folks, it got because they had these truths of themselves as a teacher and what grade stood for. And it was just one of those things that it was really hard to have any sort of change in their thinking when it came to very traditional grading practices. And so for me personally, you had challenged me as a teacher in my thinking, and I felt like I grew in that. And also just the opportunity to have these really strong conversations was really impactful for the entire campus, and I know for our students.
Well, I'm done for the day. Thank you very much. That was very nice. As we were mentioning before we went on the air, to any educator, to know that ideas shared were used and transformed means everything. It's the world. Yeah. It keeps you going for the months on end where you don't see that. So thank you very much. You've given me a gift today. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Rick, you've done a lot for myself, and I just appreciate your time, not only for the first episode, but for today, because like I said, I was very specific about who I wanted for the 300th episode for Aspire to Lead. I never, ever thought I'd get to this point to say that 6 years later, I'm still going on this podcast. Your episode, for those who haven't checked it out, it was back in September 2019. It was episode 71. And Rick was on fire. He was amazing. He talked about assessment. We talked about his book, but I will just note that for folks who didn't hear this part of it afterwards, Rick gave some very inspirational words. And I will want to highlight the fact that Rick was a huge inspiration as to why I wrote my book, Aspire to Lead, and gave me the confidence firsthand to say, like, hey, you should do that. You have something to say. Even when it was very small in my mind, that conversation was so impactful that I literally started to write after my conversation with Rick. So I wanted to highlight that, Rick.
That's really a powerful sentiment, that you felt like it gave you something to say, like you had something to say, and that you found a voice.
Yeah.
Educere, well, the root of educator is educere, and that means to draw out. And I'm just struck by any educator, their goal is not to, give you lots of content, but to draw out of you your potential, your future, your very best self. And, that feels like, it sort of happened with you there, but shouldn't that be a goal for every classroom, let alone every building leader and district leader, is how do I draw out the future, the very best potential in all of my colleagues, my students, whatever they might be. So I like what you said there. It gave me voice that I had something to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Rick Wormeli says it, I go with it. So to have that.
Let's talk about stock investments and real estate. No.
That'll be a post-recording conversation for us. But
okay.
No, I appreciate you so much, Rick. I know I'm sharing a lot of love your way in this episode, but I really do truly feel that it's necessary. And I want to touch on just really, I mean, if you think about the world, how things have changed since our first conversation. I'm just curious about the landscape of post-pandemic and the world of assessment. Kind of what are some things that have been major challenges, now that we're back in schools? I'm just curious, what that looks like for you.
Well, I continue. I don't have my own classroom, my own building. I continue to work with schools around North America and around the world. And DOD, Archdiocese, Seventh-day Adventist, independent schools, charter schools, public, private, air coasts, whatever it might be. And you see some of the common trends. Yep. One of the things that I think COVID opened a lot of people's minds to this is that they used to rely on the trappings of their personality and the school ritual, getting up, getting out of bed, going to the bus, the car, the walking to school, and going through the class regimen. And they were getting by on that. And when COVID happened and people had to teach online or teach a little bit differently, they realized, I should teach the way the brain learns, the mind best learns, not just the way to manage the classroom. And that fundamentally turned a corner for a lot of people. It was a big, steep, rocky climb, a hill to climb. But I realized that I can't just shrink wrap what I do in my classroom and put it through a camera lens and it pops out the other side and expands out to whatever the child's situation is on that side, and it's just as effective as it would be when they were here. And then some kids were turning off cameras, and absenteeism, was up. And so I think that was a sort of a positive, that came out of that. But one of the other things that came out of that was in the assessment world, I have to actually assess you on what you've learned, not what you've done. And that has all kinds of ramifications in generative AI as well. But in the moment, we're saying, man, I should teach in a developmentally appropriate manner. I should really emphasize learning, not jumping through hoops, because we don't have time to mess with that. Along the same time, though, about 21, 22, and definitely last year, 23, and this year, 24, and going into 25, people have been saying, we've got to speed up learning. We've got, like I just read a most recent research report that says, young adolescents or middle school are about a full year behind. And some have said that about elementary students and maybe early high school as well. And so we're going to hurry up and get you up to speed. You can't hurry learning. It does take time and dedication and resources to do that. But some communities with ESSER funds ending in the States, at least for those of you aware of that in the United States, and other COVID funding things, it's ending. And so we're not having those resources to do the work that still needs to happen. So I think we're still committed to students being successful, but we're removing the very things that we were using that were helping us move forward or move the needle, in that regard. So I think that we're going to go back to a place, if we haven't already arrived there, how do 10-year-old brains best learn? And let me do that. Or 16-year-old or 7-year-old brains. Let me do that. And then let me give additional resources as necessary without taking away the meaningful things that students, they come to school to for that very purpose. For example, I don't double up on math and reading courses to get you ready for a state or provincial exam. I know that those other courses that would be subsumed in that double emphasis are the very things that give connection and meaning and allow you to be your authentic self. So if I take that away from you, then why should you bother? There's no engagement. And those other subjects are the very things that give meaning to some of the more academic core subjects that are being tested. So I can't take it away. I need to find cleverer ways. You can be efficient. And we're in the world where we can use so many apps and Chrome extensions and generative AI and chat box to help with that. Yes. But I don't want people to think that you can do a fundamental change in long-term memory, which is kind of an operative definition from Kirsch and others for what does it mean to learn something. You can't do that in the quick. And things can't be packaged and just set on your doorstep. And you go, oh yeah, I've learned it because I was exposed to it. Learning is so much more than that. But there are some teachers who still are like, well, I said it, so they must have learned it because I said it and they heard it. No, that's not what learning is at all. It's a false sense that learning happened. And that for students that learning happened, but also that teaching happened. Lectures, unless they're really, really stylized in such a way, creating narrative and audience engagement and all kinds of other things, and you periodically stop to help people process and summarize content. Lectures give that false sense that learning happened and teaching happened. And we have to be very careful with that. So I think there's a lot of, awakenings with that. The one thing that I think has been a real problem has been book bans and teachers fearful for their livelihood and lives, librarians also and principals in various places, the association that teachers are groomers and not to be trusted. And this is also in science. It's not in medicine, not just in teaching, but a loss of respect for the professional, that you have professional expertise and wisdom and insight in a given situation. No, I read a low, conspiracy piece online, so I know better than you. Even though I'm the one that studied so deeply about how the mind best learns, I am the one that has dedicated myself and thinking creatively about this. You automatically have a suspicion because somebody has a professional degree. That's really grinding, and it's not the way forward for so many communities. So I think we need to reverse that and to prove to communities once again, like we haven't been doing all along, that we are professionals, we know what we're doing, and that parents, there are wonderful ways, and community leaders and business leaders, wonderful ways for you to share your wisdom about your child and education in your community, but for us to work together, not as adversary, but as advocates of one another. So that gets back also to the civil discourse that comes with political toxicity and other things. But for right here, right now, that's demoralizing. And we've got so many classrooms without teachers. I've been called into a number of schools just in the last 3 years, let alone right in the middle of COVID, but even the last 3 years and even in 24, we couldn't find enough people. So we heard these people talking about books they loved in the garden center at Home Depot. So we hired both of them to be our high school English teachers because they like books and they seemed like they were decent people. And when we fingerprinted them, they cleared the records. They were okay. But wait, no, where's your pedagogy, your crap? They've got none of it. So they invite people like me to come in and try to get them up to speed. And, it's a really difficult climb when you're building the airplane while it's in flight, which a lot of us do. But I think that there's a sentiment that we don't have enough teachers. We have plenty of teachers, but many of them have quit or chosen not to return. So we've got to change those teaching conditions so we get the really highly qualified people in the class and not people who are just winging it with no professional background. I've said a lot there, but those are the initial observations coming out of COVID era 2020 through today.
I told you a lot has happened since the last time we talked. So I knew there's going to be a lot of challenges. And I think, Rick, that really highlights all of the many things that you do. I know that myself and some others really kind of pigeonhole you into, Rick is the assessment guy, he does standards-based grading, but I know that you also assist schools in so many other areas. So I would like to highlight a couple of things that you said, because there was probably a good number of things that you have seen just as far as challenges. And I couldn't agree with you more. I've seen those firsthand as an administrator on the campus, everything you said, but I would like to touch on the generative AI, just the integration in schools right now. There's a lot of fear with that. And, how is that going to change the landscape of the classroom, the school? As a teacher, do I lean into that because it's something that they need to know? Or is it something that I just ban and say you can't use in my classroom? So when you're working with schools, specifically with AI, what are some of those strategies that you like to share to help them through such a advanced technology?
Well, one, we don't have all the answers about what AI is going to be able to do for us in the very near future, let alone far future, let alone what the impact will be in the current. So we have to constantly keep vigilant. So I would say, follow ISTE, ASCD, or any other tech leaders that you can recommend, or that you hear our colleagues talking about. Read their books, stay up to speed. Probably in the last year, I've read at least 26 books on AI just used in the classroom, and then also done the online tutorials myself, experimented with AI, coach teachers as they were trying to figure out AI. So I'm trying to keep abreast, and it's very hard to keep abreast when things keep changing. So that's just one bit of insight. There are wonderful, wonderful things AI can do for us. But there's a whole lot of people who are a little bit more zealous that need to pull back a little bit, that they're saying, oh, AI can do this, AI can do this. That creeps me out and is completely out of alignment with what we know about how the mind best learns. For example, right now, we are talking during the Olympics, but there is a commercial on TV that should worry everyone. And I won't name the product or anything, but it's about a generative AI where the father or somebody is asking the AI chatbot or new entity to help his daughter write a letter of support, and how this one Olympian inspired them to do that. So they write the letter for the girl, and she just kind of finesses it and then sends it off. No, not even close. First draft should be done by the kid. That's where that and all the neurons are, all that stuff. So one of the things that we want to get across is that when the brain is learning something and interacting with something, there are predictable and unpredictable. There's systemic and non-systemic factors that go into that neural processing. Some of it might simply be the endocrine system, pituitary gland, pineal gland, all this stuff, that intersection, their physiology, their growth, their aha moment when it's very organic and they see this, but it connects to a memory over here. All that stuff is there. And we don't want that happening outside the skull. We want it happening in the skull. So there are a lot of books that I take a big X and I go, this should be done by the kid. Have AI summarize the article. No, the literal act of summarization. By the way, I wrote a whole book on that. So the literal act of summarization is a learning tool to help you make content your own and to make connections and to find enough meaning to stick with it and to engage. What disengages kids is when it's spoon-fed and just handed to them. James Nottingham would say, he wrote all those books about challenges and specifically the learning pit. There's no learning pit for me to kind of wrestle with ideas before the teacher facilitates my clarity and the application as we do that. So I want to make sure that I don't take away the experiences. I don't want AI to think for children the things that they can think for themselves that actually lead to connection and long-term retention. So, the new book is 60 Techniques, and they're technology infused. That's the old book. Thank you for popping that up. But the new one came out like 2019 from ASCD. I highly recommend it, with my co-author, Deidre Stafford. We wrote it together. She did kind of the tech QR code stuff and some of the strategies within, but we took the old book, rewrote it, and advanced it for a technological application age, if you're curious.
Love it. Yeah.
At any rate, the other things to think about, though, one is privacy. For example, every time you submit student writing for AI detection or plagiarism or something like that, the machine, the generative AI is now using that as a learning platform and will use that as a basis for responses or predictions made to other prompts that are engineered and refined and given to them. And so now we have this idea of student work is being used to educate this machine learning and creating the LLM, the large language models and things that are out there. Is that okay? And then there's that degree of, okay, you're allowed to use AI to get resources, but that's it. Give me the top 5 articles on X, but then there's bias that creeps in there. So I need to refine my prompt and engineer it in such a way that I try to remove the bias. Are students prepared, to do that? Are they overtly taught? That's hard for adults. By the way, here in Virginia, where I live, in Chantilly, which is right next door, you've got the good title there. Thank you for that. Right next door, there is a job opening for prompt engineer for AI, starting salary $250,000. That's going to be an arts craft. What are the rest of us doing in education? Let's just move. No. There's more to it than that. But I thought that was pretty impressive as one of the main jobs of the future to be able to do that. But AI, interview this historical figure, practice having a conversation with this student about his cheating, and AI, would you pretend to be the student given these factors, which creates all kinds of biases and does not fully prepare you for this. So that's creepy and that's weird. And I would say, whoa, we need to redefine what constitutes learning, because people don't have a clear mindset of what does it really mean to have learned something. They tend to look at learning as doing something as opposed to actually learning it, and the fundamental change in long-term memory and the processing thereof. So if you emphasize as a teacher getting stuff done, finishing a product, doing stuff, AI really makes sense for a lot of students. But if it's about learning, then AI is harder to justify, because you've got to do this performance over here. So as we've talked about before, in grading, you separate the doing from the learning. So I did this stuff, but I have no idea if you learned it. So when a teacher says, and we mentioned this, I think last time, well, he got a low grade, he failed because he didn't do the homework or the assignments or the project, that has nothing to do with it. What matters is, do I have evidence of your learning? So if you did it another way, if I found an alternative way to do it, I can still value that because I'm looking at the evaluative criteria expressed in a different evidence, but it is ample, robust, and accurate evidence to doing that. Another thing that's running through my mind, and I got this idea from a wonderful book written for college professors, but not, but there's so much that applies to K-12. I highly recommend it. It's called Teaching with Artificial Intelligence, and I can probably find it at some point. It's somewhere in my office here. Anyway,
well, as we can see, for those on YouTube, there's about 200 books behind a Rick.
Oh, wait. I got it. Hold on. This is the book, Teaching with AI, Practical Guide to a New Era of Human Learning. Just came out this year.
Love it.
So there you go. Teaching with AI, a little apple on it. And it's by Bowen and Watson. Bowen and Watson. There you go. At any rate, they got me thinking about this, and I saw it in a few other articles, and then the book just kind of cemented it for me. When you interact with AI, like a search engine, it's there to please you. It's there to do whatever your bidding is.
Yep.
And it's really easy to get along with AI. But when you have to interact with a human, there's friction, and there's inconsistency and emotional response, and you have to navigate that. That's exhausting. If I have been doing AI, I don't build the stamina to interact with humanity, the messy people and individuals we are, with all of our idiosyncrasies. And I think that is going to fundamentally affect classrooms, faith communities, collaboration amongst political groups, is the diminished capacity to find value in navigating human relationships. Not even the idea of being physically present. Like online, you and I can go back and forth, but I can't see all of your body language. I can't see your context. And I don't have to interact with you every single hour of every single day, or many hours for a particular day. It's just one and done. We go off and do our own thing and become our own people. But how do I maintain my authentic self when it is causing that friction with others, which is incredibly building and strength finding for an individual to experience? And more kids are, in a sense, are deflecting or choosing to avoid that friction by becoming much more ensconced in AI. But that's also where you're getting a dopamine rush, and we become addicted to that. I find adults doing this as well. I'd rather do an on-game escapism. I'd rather just dive into even just search engines, chatbots, analysis, whatever it was. Oh, look, this is really cool. I can do this with my graphic design. I can set this up over here. Look at the marvel of AI. I'm so entertained by that. But choosing my humanity, my human partner, I'm not as much entertained by that. And I think that's a concern. It's something that we should, about which we could be concerned. Piggybacking on that, one other concept from the book, and then I'll get out of the book so much, that I found very valuable was, if AI can do it better than I can do it, why should I even bother trying it? Why should I do it? And so this idea of, do I matter? And there are whole organizations dedicated to matter making. You matter a lot, because a lot of people don't feel like they matter. There's a whole world. I do a lot of sessions on what's a constructive response to anxiety, panic disorder, and depression, things like that. And we talk about this a lot. And there's a whole sense of, am I enough? Am I Hispanic enough, gay enough, heterosexual enough? Am I, Christian enough, Jewish enough, Muslim enough? Am I smart enough, funny enough, strong enough, good looking, whatever it is? Am I enough is a constant refrain. And in our society that feels a lot more fragile with the political attacks and everything else, everybody's kind of doubting, am I a good enough father, good enough mother or husband? Am I a good enough teacher? Am I a good enough student? Do I really belong here? And we don't want AI to take that away from kids. So if AI could do something, the AI could write the summarization probably just fine. That's great. We could do that. But that's not the goal. The goal is that you're able to do that and that you matter, and your summarizations written for that audience and that purpose have a reason to exist other than one more thing a teacher asks you to do and jumping through hoops. So the idea that the things we teach actually matter in their personal lives, allow kids to be very authentic and to find that voice is going to be huge in that world ahead. And we want to be very careful that AI doesn't diminish that in any way or destroy that capacity. Having said all this, remember, there are whole jobs where you have to prove that you're good at working with AI. So I can say learning is about learning the tech tools, and doing the artificial intelligence is great, so you're ready to do the working world. But that's not the full preparation for the working world. We have found over and over again that liberal arts education and all the other subjects allows you to think critically about the AI tools. Otherwise, you're this automaton and you're being manipulated by all that's out there, but not truly what is central to being human and the human endeavor, the adventure, and being able to navigate that. So I'm going to ask you to do a few things that we know AI can do, but it's to advance you over here and find value in that. And I think that's a very tenuous line to walk in a classroom or as a building leader, as you work with teachers. Another thing that comes to mind is about teachers. To what degree do we reveal AI use in our own work? If we're asking kids to become clean about AI and their work about that. And one of the biggest things that we found in multiple books I've read, but also in talking to experts in the field, AI detection in student work is going to be increasingly hard. It's going to fail way more. We have studies, and it might have been this book, it might have been another book, studies where they used a variety of the tools out there for AI detection. And one tool said there was about 35% that was borrowed from someplace else. And here's where it was. And some of them said, oh no, it's 100%. And then things that were written before AI was even a presence anywhere have been tested as, 85% of this was AI generated. And so it's very inconsistent. Now, humans, AI tends to be about 80, 90% accurate, but there's still 10 to 20% of false positives, or I don't know, or true negatives, or whatever it might be. But humans tend to get it right about 35 to 50% of the time, maybe 60% sometimes. So it's really off. If we're going to make all kinds of claims on, you used AI on this, so here's the punishment, you've got a lot of growth that needs to happen. You need to go back to the school, because we're not ready to make those commitments yet, those claims yet, and to have all the function or dysfunction that happens as a result of whatever conclusion you draw from that. So it's a little bit of a dicey world. Again, there's wonderful things. I love AI for something like, look, I need examples of a variety of student performances from 4th grade or from 10th grade. One is kind of a 4.0 level, one's a 3.02. Can you give me some examples I can share with students? I need to get that really quicker rather than me figuring that. I think that's cool. I think, I need some graphics that show this, because this is my concept I want to do. I'm thinking about teaching kids about using anime and manga novels and graphic novels as they portray historical events or scientific processes or math concepts. Can you give me some tools, Canva or something else, where I can use the tools for kids to create their own graphic novels? But the kids are doing the construction, not I put in a little prompt that says, make me a graphic novel about X and do this, and it suddenly pops out. That's not a good use of AI. So anyway, those are just some rambling initial thoughts about AI. You want to riff off of some of that?
Oh my goodness, there's lots. I actually wanted to talk specifically about just the friction with humans. But before I dive into that, Rick, I wanted to touch on something you also said, which was the creative process and how that's important in school. For me personally, when I was growing up, the only reason I went to school was for art and for athletics. So I can attest to that. And it's still today. Like, I don't get excited unless I have creative outlets. And I'm going to take a moment with you, Rick, to talk about something that I actually talked to you about prior to our conversation and the recording. But, I know in the past month, I've talked a lot about Magic Mind. And for those who are watching, you watched me as Rick was talking. I slammed this thing because I wanted to make sure that I had the mental performance needed to have a conversation with such a wise and insightful person like Rick. So I have one of these every single day. One, I feel like it boosts my energy. I know it for a fact. Second thing is it's healthy. I want to make sure that I'm putting good things in my body as a leader. And when I'm going and supporting schools or speaking to a large group, I want to make sure I have healthy ingredients in my body to help my brain. But then also it's super easy. So I can pack it in my luggage, or I can, throw it in my pocket if I'm going out somewhere. Those are the three main reasons why I drink Magic Mind. Now, I want to talk to you about subscriptions real quick. That is by far the best option. And this is why. One, it's free shipping. Who doesn't love free? I know last month I gave a free trial to my listeners. So hopefully you got a chance to do that. But if you want Magic Mind each day, I always do the monthly subscription. It's free shipping, hassle-free home delivery every month. If you decide to, it's super easy to cancel. And then, of course, they give a money-back guarantee. So if you don't feel like it's working, which I highly doubt, but if so, they will give you money back without even any questions. With that, I'm going to make sure that I have the code here on the screen for you. So if you go to magicmind.com/aspire-to-lead and use the code aspire-to-lead20, and that'll get you 20% off of your order. And if you're doing the subscription, I just want to let you know that if Magic Mind is giving an additional promotion, it will add the 20% on there. So you can get up to 45% off of your order if you use the code for my Aspire to listeners. So make sure you go into that code. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it on the screen. For those who are listening on the podcast platforms, make sure that you're heading over to joshchamber.com. In the show notes, you'll see it. Actually, it's on my main page also for those who are interested. You don't have to go far to find this code, but I want to make sure that you're getting savings and putting something super healthy in your body, as it is an amazing mental performance shot. So with that, Rick, I want to go back to something that I experienced quite a bit, especially after the pandemic, which is something that you highlighted and said with AI, which was the friction with humans. And so, with all kinds of folks, students, teachers, parents, community members, there were a lot of civil discourse topics that came up. You had talked about book banning. There were certain things in classrooms that they didn't want to see. It might have been religious, might have been based on sexual preference. There were so many tough discussions to have to navigate. I know this is something that you work with leaders and school districts all over the country about. So when you're discussing the civil discourse piece, what do you tell folks to do to kind of work through that friction that may come up in these difficult conversations?
Well, before I do that, I just want you to get down to your local Piggly Wiggly and pick up the new flavor of sherbet ice cream, blueberry, the new
Piggly Wiggly
right there. That's our sponsor. Moving on.
Hey, I have some ties. The Stamper family has some ties to Piggly Wiggly, so I'm a fan.
Well, what's interesting is that my dad had the #1 TV show in New Mexico in the late 50s. It was kind of a riff on Saturday Night. It's sort of like Saturday Night Live before Saturday Night Live became Saturday Night Live. But he used to do that as the host. He would pull up the new product from the local Piggly Wiggly and have to explain it. And now back to our dance team. So I'm being back my to you, Rick. His tribute to my dad. He's still alive. I'll show him this later.
Awesome.
So if I'm getting clarity on the response, it is those things that we might advise leaders to help with that civil discourse as we're moving forward in some of those third rail topics.
Yep.
Well, the first thing is, I get emails, sometimes phone calls, pretty much once a week, maybe more sometimes, from leaders and classroom practitioners who say, we had an incident, we're not allowed to talk about it because it could exacerbate, blow up, and we don't have the skill set to deal with it.
Yep.
And students are starving, and they are so hungry for adults to model, how do I handle this thing and navigate myself? You don't even do it. You don't even handle it. And it's just going to continue to exacerbate and become worse and worse and fester if you don't do that. And teachers are too. And especially if kids are crying and there's a transgender bathroom issue and people are polarized on different sides. There's a book banning, whatever it might be. And there are some marriages that have broken apart because of politicking and everything. People become very divisive. So there's a lot to this. I would be glad to send slides or talk to people about it in greater depth down the road. It is insufficient to do it in a quick podcast. But a few things off the top of the head. One is rehearsal. You've got hypotheticals, case scenarios. What would be a constructive response? And we get it down to the nitty gritty. If a teacher were to say this, well, you know why they're late, they're that kind of people and whatever it is, and they make some kind of disparaging remark, whatever it might be. How do I respond to that? What's the first thing I say? And then the second thing is, let's say they say this back. What do I say second? And by that point, usually people are ready to get into the conversation. It's just, what do I say first? I am so afraid that I will say something wrong and it will blow up. I'll be out of my depth. I will insult other people. I say nothing, which is a form of consent and complicitness in the hurt that was caused. That means you're asking the person that was hurt to bear the burden of all that insult and diminishment. And it's stunning. But it does come from a place of privilege. I'm in a position where I'm male and I'm white, middle class. And so there's not a lot of people who are sexist towards me or classist, because they realize I am not impoverished. They don't think whatever stereotypes are associated with that are so negative. I'm not somebody of color. I'm not somebody of that other religion over there. I'm of this religion that seems to be the same one, or whatever it might be. So I can move about and go about my day being myself, whereas the others cannot. So I'm going to ask first for people to rehearse ahead of time, because if you don't rehearse ahead of time, your responses in small groups, and I might say something, go, well, I wouldn't say that. I might say this. Oh, that's really good. The sum of us gives dimension and is better than the one of us. But if I've done the rehearsal, the early work, when it really happens or something close to it, I know where to go with that. I don't walk away going would have, could have, should have, and then try to pick up the emotional debris the next day. That's not going to work. So that's one. The other thing is, I think it's okay if something is really overt and hurtful, whether it's institutional, systemic, or individual, that you do a specific desist. I don't find that funny. That is offensive. You need to stop now. I mean, that kind of thing, very direct, you can do. But I think there's also a place for speaking in such a way as to keep the conversation going, not to shut it down to prove you were right and they were wrong. That sort of thing. Jim Knight, who's wonderful with instructional coaching, of course, he talks about, you try to ask questions where you're not trying to prove somebody wrong as you're doing that. I'm going to ask questions, say, hey, can you tell me more about where that comes from? Does it come from a place of nurture and support, or does it come from someplace else? I wonder if you would say that about this kind of person, to their face, if they were present. Oh, you wouldn't? Or this one I love, it's kind of a pitch back. When you say that, it comes across like this. Is that what you intended? Was that your intent? No? How would you like to rephrase that so it gets closer to your intention and is in alignment with your values? There are lots of times when we have to confront people with their hypocrisy, but it doesn't always go well in education. And I want to be gentle about confronting them. Hey, you said this, this is something you support. This is something we talked about, our integrity ideals, what we believe about equity, yet you're saying this, or you have this policy in the classroom. Can you show me how you reconcile those two? Because I'm struggling with that, and I need that clarity in order for me to support you. I would just need that clarity. Now, I will tell you that there are sometimes people say things, and this is somebody just as an education leader, and maybe as a colleague too. They say things, but they're really masking something else that's really bothering them, and it's not this. And if I start responding to that superficial thing, we're never going to get to the crux of it. So I might do this. When you say that, I hear three things that are a concern. One is this, one is this. You're worried about teaching responsibility. You're also worried about the parents and what the child faces at home. I'm being constructive in the way they described it. They were very derogatory, but I'm trying to put it in different framings. Which one would you like to talk about first? And so I need to boil it down because they're just bubbling up. I'm really good with the number one rule of improv, yes and. And so if I dismiss your observation as unwarranted or inappropriate, I've lost you. So sometimes I have to run with that just a little bit and then help you turn the corner to get back over here. So yeah, I see where that might have been your experience with that school you were in before. In my experience, I found this. When I find that when I speak, or when we all do this, in the first person plural, the collective we and us, it feels like we're in collaboration and we have camaraderie. If I say you should, defensive walls go up. If I say, well, I and me, then you have a memoir of me doing it, but you don't really see yourself doing it. You just see, oh, that's a Rick thing. So when I say, we all really struggle with chronic disruption in the classroom, and this student has been very challenging. Is that what I'm hearing from you? So I'm rephrasing it. I'm doing that peer, feedback kind of thing. And, it de-escalates and they're able to actually focus on the issue. So my gift, if I was going to facilitate that, would be to help them analyze it and help them arrive at the solution, not me tell them what they should do. And they become passive and they easily dismiss whatever I'm going to give them. But when they've arrived at it, they own it and they're willing to do it. So I need to get you to do the heavy lifting, but I am there to provoke in a constructive way that allows you to move forward. I'm a real big believer too. I think we're very moved in our society by graphics. And so if there are little video clips of somebody's, rights or an injustice being perpetuated, that we can show little clips, as long as it doesn't re-trigger. I don't want to re-traumatize somebody who was actually the victim of some trauma that was perpetuated by somebody else. So I'd ask permission to do that. And then we would have keep those as kind of a catalog in our building to go back and refer to it. But again, we could practice how might we respond to this, if it was really happening in the room. I think that we don't necessarily have a school culture where we can ask candid questions. And we need to have that. How am I candid with you? And then how do I help students become candid with their own biases? So, when you shorten a student from another country because you can't pronounce their name, when you shorten their name, can I just call you Sam? We've got a good relationship. He likes it. It's okay. He just smiles when I call him Sam. No, you are diminishing all that he is. You're taking away his entirety, his authentic self, and replacing it with your particular earned narrative, not his earned narrative. It is earned insights. And you're definitely coming across as he is less than. That's not going to help. In all of this, and I wrote an article about this. You're welcome to look for it if you want, anybody listening. But classroom practitioners, teachers, and principals, assistant principals, need to keep up with school law. There's a heck of a lot going on where we could remedy an injustice if we knew the law, state and federal, provincial, or we could keep from violating something that would make it unjust. But if we don't know the law, it is really hard to remain attentive to that. So every year, it is completely worth it to have an entire PD session, half day, an hour, whatever it is, or a series of articles that we're asked to read and then comment and discuss what is the latest on school law as it pertains to the students that we teach. I think that could help a lot. There is so much more here to create empathy and constructive civil discourse, but those are some initial thoughts to get us going.
Oh my goodness. Rick, I know you are right. I mean, we don't have enough time in our conversation today to really dive in, but I love the strategies that you provided. And I was shaking my head vigorously for those who are watching on video. I also know that you provide so much PD with school districts, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to highlight some of the additional topics that we didn't touch on today that you still assist with, because, I keep throwing up your website because I want people to reach out to you, bring you in to their school district or on their campus to assist. But you are a man that wears many hats, and you have so much insight from your background. You're helping so many folks. So what are some additional topics that if someone's struggling, on their campus, they can reach out to you and get your support?
Well, we didn't talk much about grading because we did that before, but I do a lot of that. So
you do.
Accurate, ethical, equitable grading, but
Yes.
also responsive teaching, differentiate instruction, equity measures, whatever you want to call that. If a kid's not learning, what are some things you can do?
Yep.
I do a lot with how do you build your pedagogical repertoire. So for instructional design, how do we do instructional design, but also how do we improve our repertoire for assessment? And then I do a ton on actionable descriptive feedback, where students self-monitor, like student-led conferences, but also very specific feedback techniques we can teach the kids so you're not the bottleneck. They can give feedback to themselves, to classmates, families can give feedback to children. You can give feedback. It's actually helpful. Way more than just +2, you had this, -5, you didn't have that. The feedback is so much far beyond that. I do a lot with the cognitive science or cognitive psychology principles that inform our instruction. And that also leads a heck of a lot into executive function and what we know about motivation and building tenacity and perseverance, respect for deadlines, all those things we thought we were doing through grading, but really are inappropriately done. And as people have heard me talk about, I do a lot with metaphors and analogies in instructional design and leadership. I wrote a whole book on that, in fact, metaphors and analogies, power tools for teaching any subject, just to do a shameless plug. But the idea that, like 90% of math in middle school and high school is analogy and metaphor. And a lot of kids don't understand the math because they don't understand the metaphor or comparison the teacher was using to teach it. So if we were strategic and didn't leave it to chance with metaphors and analogies, get into that. And that also led to a whole bunch of work in summarization techniques. And again, I wrote the whole book on that, which you advertised earlier. And I do a lot of that. Right now, I think also I'm being asked to do a lot of how do I cultivate a teacher's creative self? Because creativity can atrophy, as we were mentioning earlier, either before the show or earlier in the show. Yep. It can atrophy when you've taught or led for a while. So how do I build a teacher's intellect and professional self? And then this is actually super popular in 23, 24 in particular, and 25 with what's going on. How do I facilitate the journey of my faculty and my community as they shift culture and practices with a particular building initiative? Could be grading, it could be technology integration, it could be reading skills and teaching reading and science and reading and math and things like that. How do I help as a leader or as a colleague walk people through that and facilitate their journey so it's meaningful and connected to them? So the rest of it, I have articles that come out. I do 3 or 4, maybe 5 articles per year, and they're all on the website. So you can go there. The last one is really long. It's a bunch of strategies on when you do PD, like a podcast, or go to a conference or a day-long training. What do you do afterwards to make connections and summarize the process? So the article is, I think it's called, "We Just Did Professional Development. Now what?" So if you type that in Rick Wormeli, it will come right up. And the article right before that came out was on, earlier this year, it came out on, hey, learning is still paramount, and it's guidelines for using generative AI in the classroom. But if you just type in learning is still paramount with AI or something like that, and Rick Wormeli, I forgot what the editor actually called it, it'll come up, but those will be posted on the website, if not already, within the next week or so.
Yeah. Well, just for everyone that's listening, I'm going to have everything at joshsanford.com. So everything that Rick is talking about, if it's a book, if it's an article, you name it, I'm going to make sure I have all the links there for the listeners, because obviously, I want to make sure everyone is getting all of these resources. It's so amazing what Rick is creating, not only in the articles, but the books also. So we'll make sure that we have all the links also to connect with Rick. So Rick, I know obviously your website is probably the main place that we're going to be sending folks. As far as social media, is there anywhere that folks can connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I'm on X/Twitter. Yeah. So you can do at Rick Wormeli 2, because the first one was hacked. So I always add a 2 to the end of my name. And can we just post the email in whatever resources you post later?
Yeah, I'll make sure the email's there for folks too.
Okay, so I'll just say it out loud. It's Rick at Rick Wormeli, like it's one word, on Microsoft, like that's one word, on Microsoft.com. But we'll post it in the resources available. Yeah. And can I just say, Josh, thank you for the book Aspire to Lead. And thank you and congratulations on your 300th. Good on you, mate.
Well, Rick, I just appreciate your time. I appreciate your support. You, like I said before, you are an inspiration in my life. And I wanted to shout you out today. I wanted to highlight again, for those who haven't had a chance to go back and listen to episode 71, please do so. It's like I said, it was the most fun that I've had on an episode. Rick, I mean, obviously your dad is in you because you're an entertainer. You're super, wonderful in front of a microphone, an audience. You're wonderful as far as providing PD too. So if you are interested in anything that Rick is talking about today, please make sure that you're bringing him out to your organization, to your district, to your campus. Make sure that you are tapping into that wisdom. He has a wealth of resources at your fingertips too. So make sure that you're diving into those many resources. And with that, Rick, thank you so much for joining me for number 300.
Hey, thank you. And just for the sake of my dad, I'll tell you the name of the show is Happy Harry's Hangout. So if you are in New Mexico and you're old enough, you remember the late 50s, early 60s, there was a show called Happy Harry's Hangout, and he was Happy Harry. That's not his real name, but that's the show. Thank you for letting me say that. He's going to be thrilled.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to try and find this show and try and consume it. So shout out to your dad.
If you want the other generation, Ryan Wormeli, my son, he's the guy who does a lot of the graphics and all the sports analysis for Fantasy Pros. So if you ever play fantasy team football, baseball, look up Fantasy Pros and you will find Ryan Wormeli, and that's my son.
Just going down the family line. I love it.
Yeah,
so much.
right. I'll tell you about the rest of them in the next, number 600. We'll do the rest of the family then.
I was going to say, based on the topics that we didn't cover today, I know what we're going to be discussing the next time you come on. So
that'd be great.
All right. I appreciate you so much. And thank you again for being on Aspire to Lead.
Thank you.